one. So I'm not posting it. I'm so sorry.
No, that's the standard.
And we're streaming live anyway, so all these people now, they're going to know that there's some selfie I don't like. I'm not posting it. That's all there is to it.
Amy is refusing to post a picture of me because she doesn't look good.
That's all there is to it.
Okay. What I want to do here. We're live on all platforms except Spreaker. We're not on Spreaker yet. We'll be on Spreaker in a minute.
So you're doing Blog Talk and Spreaker? Yeah?
No, Spreaker replaced Blog Talk.
Oh, okay.
Blog Talk kind of Blog Talk was bought by Spreaker and then moved everything to their platform. Okay, here we go. Okay. Music time.
The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brooks Show.
I like that bumper music. It's pretty cool. Hey, Amy, how's it going?
It's going okay. It's your music, so I guess.
My music. Yeah. It's not music I would listen to, but for the beginning of a radio show, you know.
Admit it, Yaron. You listen to it all day long.
All day long. That's all. I just played in a loop in the background as I'm doing other things, and this is what, show number 5 in a row or 4 in a row, or whatever for me. It's been a hectic couple of weeks, but it's good. It's good. My shows, the last few videos are doing really well. You know what's interesting? I was going to say this tomorrow. So I did the show on this creep, Jeffrey Epstein, right? And that, and you know, Christian took a clip of that and has just posted the clip that I talk about just Jeffrey Epstein, because I did other stuff during the show.
Sure.
That's almost up to 20,000 views.
Wow.
I think it's either, well, maybe it's 13,000, 17,000, I think. And what's interesting is, so almost all my shows are watched on YouTube predominantly by men, right? It's 95% male, 5% female. And I haven't looked at the stats of our show together, but my guess is it's at least that, right? It's almost all guys. And the one on Jeffrey Epstein is getting 2/3 female, 1/3 man. So the new audience, it's audience that typically won't listen, doesn't listen to me, and it's got a life. It keeps going. It keeps going up, and I'm getting a lot of new subscribers. So it's actually really good. That's the best. I mean, in terms of getting subscribers, that's the best show I've done. But it's this female-male thing, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't been doing enough of this and long enough to know where I can go to expand my audience and such. So we'll see.
Have you looked at YouTube in terms of female, male viewers of your show?
Not yet. I mean, you know, again, I'm just starting. And, you know, tomorrow I'm supposed to do the second show of the None of the Above series, and Jim is sick. So
you'll have to do it by yourself.
Yeah. And I've got the sick dog, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we're going to dive in, right? So I've got the big question for today. It's big question, which is big tech or big government, whom do you trust? And this is the question that we have to ask increasingly more and more, because there's this government clampdown on the big tech companies from 2 angles, right? The privacy angle, and we'll talk some about that. It was that FTC order from last week. And then also the so-called censorship angle, right? That's looming. That's the antitrust angle, although I don't have that in the program notes. But what I do have in the program notes, you get a chance. You said that you were eager to do this. We have the Missouri senator, a Republican senator, who is deciding that it is time to clamp down on social media for being too addictive. This is Josh Hawley. So today's your chance.
Republican from Missouri. I mean, Josh Hawley has now become my favorite Republican senator, and he's competing with like Elizabeth Warren And who else on the Democratic side? Bernie Sanders, who's a senator. He's competing with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren as most hated senator in the U.S. Senate. And now here he put out this thing where he wants to ban. This is a bill, literally proposing a bill. This is what your senators, this is what your politicians are doing. This is what you are paying them to do. He's putting out a bill that would ban addictive technology. Mm-hmm. So it's called Social Media Addiction Reduction Technology Act. Social Media Addiction Technology, say that fast. Social Media Addiction Technology Act. It's hard.
Right.
Basically wants to ban things that increase our viewership, like autoplay. You know how you scroll down Facebook and the video autoplays? That's no good because you have no choice.
Right.
If it starts to play, what choice do you have? You're a mere human with no real free will or no meaningful free will. And therefore, you're just going to watch it. And I'm sure, he probably wants to ban nice graphics and nice user interfaces and
notifications, right? Notifications.
Anything that might cause you to engage. Now, he really wants, and he says this, really wants to ban social media. I think the world would be a much better place without social media. But that's a little radical for him. So he just wants to do this. Now, there's already a bill by Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, and Deb Fischer, Republican of Nebraska. I love these bipartisan bills. Whenever there's a bipartisan bill, I think, oh my God, both the Democrats and Republicans have agreed about the ways in which they want to screw our lives. Mm-hmm. So they have a bill that they want to prohibit the largest online platforms from using dark patterns by giving the FTC more jurisdiction over the issue. Dark patterns are all these things, all these little gimmicks that technology companies have to engage you, to get you to stay engaged, to get you to stay on the platform. Because again, we know, because we're addicted to everything. I mean, I'm addicted to chocolate. You're addicted, I don't know, what are you addicted to, Amy? A coffee or something,
Yeah, so I've got my buttered coffee addiction going, basically.
There's people addicted to, of course, alcohol and all that. That's genetically addicted. And we're just genetically, I think now, about 15 years has passed since we've had 20 years of the internet. I think we've genetically evolved now to be addicted to the internet. So we have no free will in this regard. So there is bipartisan coalitions to do this. But that is just like the icing on the cake when it comes to our friend Joshua Rowley, the senator from the great state of Missouri. Because by chance, a few weeks ago, I was doing some research about stuff and came across this guy. And he is a leader in the Senate in what I've called, or what they call themselves, conservative nationalists. He is a born-again evangelical, complete and utter nutcase. And okay, he gave a commencement address at his college, New York. So you have time to hear this thing?
Oh, certainly.
King's College in New York City, which is a religious university in New York City. And he gave the commencement address. And I'm going to skim. I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to skim. Here we go. For decades now, our politics and culture have been dominated by a particular philosophy of freedom. It is a philosophy of liberation from family and tradition, of escape from God and community, a philosophy of self-creation and unrestricted, unfettered, wait for it, free choice.
Oh, wow.
It is a philosophy that has defined our age, though it is far from new. And then he goes back and he links this to some guy who I've never heard of, Pelagius, who I guess was a Christian thinker in 350 AD during the last days of the Roman Empire, a contemporary of Augustine, right? And he says Pelagius, who's this really bad guy, held that individuals possessed a powerful capacity for achievement. In fact, he believed individuals could achieve their own salvation. It was just a matter of them living up to the perfection of which they were inherently capable. as this Pelagius put it, since perfection is possible for man, it is obligatory. Sounds a little objectivist, right? Since perfection is possible, all the virtues are geared, the virtue of pride is the virtue of perfection. So he put it, the key was will and effort. If individuals worked hard enough and deployed their talent wisely enough, they could indeed be perfect. I like this Pelagius guy. Anyway, he's the devil, according to this. Of course, this drew the O of Augustine, of Hippo. Augustine said that human nature was a permanent thing, that it was dependent on God. We were all fallible. We suffered weakness and need. You remember Augustine's the one who used to whip himself after rolling in the snow when he thought impure thoughts. So this guy, so he's riling against this in his commencement speech. He says, and this is towards the end, he says, because if freedom means choice among options, then the people with the most choices are the most free. Really, that's a confusion about what freedom means, of course. Mm-hmm. And that means the rich. Now, you'd think think if this could be Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren talking, right? And that means the rich. And if salvation is about achievement, then those with the most accolades are righteous. And that means the elite and the strong. But if you don't have family wealth and you don't have a 4-year degree, and that's 70% of Americans, well, the future is far less glowing. These Americans haven't seen a real wage increase in 30 years. Not true, but put aside. These Americans are fighting to hold their families together as divorce rates surge. For these Americans, healthcare is unaffordable. Drug addiction is growing, and too many of their local communities, especially rural ones, have been gutted as industry consolidates and ships jobs away. A society divided by class. He's a semi-Marxist theologian. Where one class enjoys all the advantages is a society gripped by hierarchy, and hierarchy, of course, is awful. When industry ships jobs overseas, they say workers should find another trade. Capital must be allocated to most efficient use. That's what I say. When workers without college degrees can't get a good job, they say that's their fault. They should have gone to college. Now, I rather suspect that if globalization threatened America's tech industry or banking sector, our elites would sing a very different tune. We would hear how those industries are the lifeblood of the American economy and must be protected at all costs. This is a Republican.
He sounds, first of all, it sounds like he got in the wrong party. But second of all,
no, I don't think so. This is the Republican Party. Let's be
right. So this is, I bet Tucker loves him, right? I bet Tucker just loves him.
Loves Donald Trump, yes. This is the Republican Party in the era of Donald Trump. This is it. And he goes on and he goes on to what the cross represents. And he says the cross announces the weakness and need of every person. And that means it excludes the boasting and the pride of the few. The cross says the talented, the well-born, the well-educated do not deserve special privileges. Well, nobody deserves special privileges of government. They're not more valuable than anyone else. Well, by what standard? The call of God comes to every person, and the power of God is poured out on all who believe. This has spiritual ramifications, but cultural and political ones as well. Paul says it is the humble, the everyday, those without social status whom God chooses to exercise, through whom God chooses to exercise his power.
The meek shall inherit the earth, right?
And so by extension, it is not the privileged, but the common man or woman, not the elite, but the everyday person who moves the destinies of the world. Really? Isn't it the Galileos or the Michelangelos and the Newtons and the geniuses who move?
He's standing in a country that, anyway.
We must rebuild a culture that affirms the dignity of the working man and women. This is Bernie Sanders. That protects their way of life and honors their central role in the life of this country. Of course, working men and women implies that, if you have a PhD, you don't work. If you're in a tech company, you don't work. Working means Marxist BS. We must rebuild an economy that will offer opportunity for every American worker, whether a degree, whatever degree she may have, whether he may live, wherever they may live, an economy that rewards hard, productive work. For that, after all, is the work that built this country. We must build a democracy run not by the elites, but by the great middle of America. I don't know what he has against the poor. right? We're the middle of America. What happened to the meek shall inherit the earth, and the poor should do it, right?
Maybe he doesn't think the poor can understand his message as much as the middle, where the middle strives to be higher. And so they're frustrated. Like you were talking about in your show yesterday, that they've been fed all this stuff for so long that they're the ones who are receptive to this sort of message.
Yeah. A democracy that allows the working man and women to realize their God-given ability to govern themselves and help manage the life of this nation. So
govern themselves, but no choice.
Yeah, the problem with the world today is we have a philosophy of self-creation. You can create yourself, a self-made soul, Ayn Rand would say, an unrestricted, unfettered free choice. That's the problem that we have today. I'd say what the problem we have today is our unrestricted, unfettered free choice is being hampered by government regulations, government control, and philosophies that keep telling us, don't use your free choice. Don't exercise your free choice. Don't use your reason. Don't use your mind. But you don't have one anyway. You don't have free will anyway, or, do what God tells you and shut up. And so this is conservatism. This is the Republican Party, which many of you support. This is the alternative to Bernie Sanders. I don't see it as an alternative to Bernie Sanders.
No, and clamping down on social media and the so-called addictive part of social media is exactly along those lines. It's reducing choice to a certain extent. So what it says is they want to automatically limit the amount of time a user may spend on platforms across all devices to 30 minutes a day, unless the user elects to adjust or remove the time limit. And if the user elects to increase or remove it, resets the time limit to 30 minutes a day on the first day of every month. So basically it's like, we're big brother, big sister trying to help you get a better habit. Now, if a person wants to choose a mechanism like this for himself or herself, you can buy, there's, software and stuff that will help you do this. But this is not a proper function of government. And, it's interesting because I was talking with Steve Simpson yesterday, who is just so brilliant. And he expanded some of my thinking on privacy in the following way, which is that even if there's something the government is doing where you say, okay, well, how is government exactly infringing your rights here? Now you could say, okay, we can point to how they are infringing the social media companies' rights, because it would be forcing the companies to install a feature into their platform that they've never had before, that they would not offer of their own free choice, say, right? Yeah. So it is infringing on their rights. It's forcing them to do something. But suppose, it's just, well, they took a collection up, a voluntary collection. Suppose Howley decided to do this. He's going to do a GoFundMe. And the GoFundMe is going to result in a petition and a big campaign to get the social media companies to voluntarily put this feature in. Suppose he's going to do it that way, right? There are certain things the government just shouldn't be doing. Even if you can't point to a particular right violation, government is something whose function is supposed to be inherently limited to enumerated powers, right?
Yeah. It's positive. Everything the government does should have as its goal the protection of individual rights.
Yes.
So it's not just the stuff that violates rights. It's anything that is not focused on protecting rights is none of the government's business.
Yes. Yes.
So it's an active, the purpose of government is positive, not a negative.
Yes.
It's to act to protect our rights.
Yes.
And look, this is what Ayn Rand, remember Ayn Rand used to say, Democrats want to regulate our boardroom and the Republicans want to regulate our bedroom. Now, today, both parties want to regulate both. But in this case, this is an example of a bedroom type thing, right? They want to regulate our behavior. See, Republicans don't think the material world is important. This is Ayn Rand's observation. Mm-hmm. They don't think the material world is important. What's important is the spiritual world, how you spend your time, how you entertain yourself, what you do in your bedroom, how you live. The material stuff, how you make money, that's dirty. Who cares? Let the market deal with that. This is Luther. Yeah. This is Calvin. It's too dirty for us to deal with. In the utopia of the afterlife, we have communism. We don't deal with this capitalism stuff. So Republicans are capitalists not because they appreciate the morality of capitalism. They're capitalists because the material world is not a world that they think is worthy of regulation. But the spiritual world, oh, yeah, it's really important that we impose on you a morality. We impose on you a way of life. We impose on you values, because you might go really wrong and then land up in hell instead of in heaven. And our job as paternalistic government is to make sure. And of course, the left views the material world as important. The Marxists, the materialists. So they want to regulate the material world. They want to regulate capitalism. They want to regulate economics. The spiritual world, that doesn't even exist. Who cares? It's all mumbo jumbo. Go do whatever the hell you want. Nobody cares. Well, we don't want to regulate that. And it's amazing to me how her identification of that, which is genius, right? Just genius, that just plays out over and over and over again. And you can see that here. Even when Republicans talk about regulating capitalism, they claim it's for spiritual reasons. They claim it's for reasons of morality and reasons of virtue.
So expanding on that, you could see why the big tech companies would be the enemy of both of those, because they are fabulously wealthy. They're a tremendous engine of production. Of course, they're very rich, the individuals who start the successful companies themselves. And then at the same time, it is a company that has a lot to do with offering spiritual values and having an effect on the culture. So they are going to be targeted by both the enemies of wealth and success and the enemies of anyone who is going to provide cultural influence at all. Because what do the Republicans want to do? They want to root everything in traditional religious values. How dare you explore any sort of alternative lifestyle or new choices or things like that? I want to give a shout out, if I could, to...
I just want to reinforce that point. I think you're absolutely right. And that's why the focus is on social media, because social media combines those two. It combines both material production, wealth, and so on, and it combines the spiritual values. It's a place where people go to seek values. And that the Republicans want to control, that the right wants to control.
Yeah. So I'll give a shout out, and then I guess also a comment building on what you started here, to Taylor Maillard over at Hot Air. And he has a great headline when he's covering this story. I put both in the blog program notes at don'tletitgo.com, by the way, the story you sent me and then this version as well. His headline was, Missouri Senator, social media is too addictive, so let's censor it. And he's very careful that, he's saying, look, what Howley is proposing to do here is actually censorship. It's not social media that's doing the censorship. It is the actual, senators like Howley here. But the thing that I wanted to give him a shout out for, and then also maybe a comment, is, he's trying to answer, how can Howley address a certain concern that he has? And he says, one has to wonder how Howley would treat all those who use social media as their primary source of income. So there's that, right? He's going to cut off a lot of income. People are not going to be seeing the ads and stuff that everyone else is paying for. Social media is a huge way to get exposure for your product or service these days. So continuing with Maillard's article, he says, this type of move to give the great god of government more power over big tech would severely harm streamers who seek to entertain via YouTube or Twitch by preventing them from even getting to understand their audience. Now, I would go broader and I'd say, the mom and pop shop around the corner is also advertising on Facebook. And if you limited 30 minutes a day, those people as well. It's not just the people who stream on the internet who are going to be hampered by this. He says, what about those who seek to educate the populace through video? He says, for every social media influencer trying to assist a company through product placement, there are gobs of videos introducing people to F.A. Hayek or Herbert Spencer or Frederick Bastiat or Ayn Rand. Right, I'll add in, right?
Fix your car, how to change a tire, anything now that I want to do instead of opening a manual, I go to YouTube and search, how do you do this? And there's a video somebody has on how to do it. And it's
Jim, there's this thing going around on Facebook, and I did not partake, but it's state your age and something you can't do. And Jim puts his age and he says, and I can't poach an egg. And then somebody puts up a YouTube video about here's how you poach an egg.
No, right? So there's videos on everything. I think they accept sex. There's pretty much videos on everything.
Well, there's videos on that too. It's just you aren't looking for them, but
maybe on the
on YouTube there aren't. Okay, that's right. Yeah, maybe someplace else. Right.
On other channels, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, they don't even allow you talking about sex, so no.
They don't monetize it, no.
I've
got a good question here when you're ready. It's a little off topic, but it's generally in the direction. So tell me.
Well, okay. So this is, of course, yet another attack on the social media platforms, and probably Howley is encouraged by the fact that last week the FTC did its own clampdown, and I've got links in the blog. I don't know when you want to talk about that. Do you want to talk about your question first and then go?
Yeah, it's a question about materialism. So since I brought up materialism.
Sure.
So Cody says, I get called a materialist a lot by conservatives, presumably because I'm an atheist. How do you differentiate your view from a materialistic view? Well, materialism assumes that everything acts kind of out there in the physical world, like billiard balls, like although they don't very necessarily even have a very sophisticated view of the physical world, because they can't ascertain certain phenomena. They don't even deal with certain physical phenomena. But everything is just, what it denies, materialism, is consciousness. What it denies is the fact that there is something else other than material. Now,
well, and it actually, I think it more denies even conceptual consciousness, right?
Well, yes, consciousness, and then conceptual consciousness, and then what conceptual consciousness makes possible is a spirit, a soul, actual, experiences of the soul, right, of the spirit, whether it's art or whether emotional experiences, love. So they assume, or free will, for example, they assume that if you don't believe in God, then there's no such thing. You don't believe there's such a thing as a soul or a spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. If you don't believe in God, they assume you don't believe in free will. And I say, no, there are two phenomena in the world. There's the material world out there, and there's the consciousness that can understand it and know it. And that consciousness has certain characteristics, among them its ability to have these experiences, emotional experiences, spiritual experiences. You don't need God for that. You just need introspection to observe that.
Well, and also the ability to design a human life, right? So the ability to design and go out and live a human life, which is going to be different for each person. It's going to, when you look at a human being, the essence of a human being is not the animal aspects, not the physical aspects. The essence of a human being is what that human being conceives of and brings into reality in the world. That's really what humans are about. And materialism would deny the importance of all of that. And Howley's denying the importance of all these, basically wants everybody to just be productive. And how dare you go and explore new values and things out there on social media, where a lot of people are becoming aware. He wants you to
follow the Bible, and he wants you to live the life as he thinks you should live, and he rejects. He thinks free will leads you to temptation. Free will leads you to the devil, and free choice leads you to the devil. And he wants to restrict your choices because we're all weak, we're all fallible, we're all easily tempted by the devil, and the devil is online. And because the devil's pretty smart and sophisticated, and he wants to save us from the devil. And look, the thing is, one of the things you have to do as an atheist, and what I do, and you can decide, I don't know how different people probably deal with this differently. I basically said, look, people say, but isn't consciousness just material? And I go, I don't know. I mean, I don't experience as a material, and I have free will. So it's not material in the same way I understand the material world out there. So how does consciousness come about? I don't know. But I know it is. It's a starting point. You're conscious because you're conscious. So that's what's important. So don't let them trick you into this reductio ad absurdum kind of a materialist view. We're not materialists. We believe there's consciousness, and we also don't know what the so-called scientific explanation of consciousness is, but we know it's an axiomatic concept because.
Yeah, well, if you did not have free will and the ability to choose what was right or wrong, any such thing as proof would be gone. So, the proof that
Yeah. So it's interesting how the
Prove that you have free
religionists,
will, no.
many secularists, many of the atheists agree about the rejection of free will, or at least agree about the rejection of free will as we see it. Also, they agree about the perfectibility of man. They think it's impossible because we're weak, we're feeble, we're corruptible. Both the left and the right completely agree about this, particularly if you're wealthy, successful, with lots of degrees, as well as Hawley said. You're particularly fallible, and the left agrees with that. I mean, it's the meek shall inherit the earth. The religionists on the right and the Marxists on the left agree on that. Just the religionists call them the proletariat, and the right calls them, I don't know, the working people, as compared to people who don't work but are very rich. I don't know how they got rich if they don't work.
No, and that's another, I mean, talk about somebody who discounts the spiritual. What he won't admit into the actual spiritual and provide the proper value for is the mental work, the work that an entrepreneur does to conceive of the best way to use capital and to arrange, a whole organization and give each person his role to play within an organization to produce a value that's going to improve human life. That sort of creative genius and the hard work that it takes to conceive that sort of thing, that's what he's discounting entirely. He wants to just say that doesn't,
that's where Marxists and them agree, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no. And, why is it? I guess he's projecting. He's the one who is weak-willed and not able to withstand or avoid the devil online. He's the one who isn't able to produce. The other day, one of the tweets that I stuck in the program notes at don'tletitgo.com was Trump was saying, I'm not going to give a special tariff exemption to Apple for their MacBook Pro or their Mac Pro or whatever the new one that's coming out is, a computer. And because they want to manufacture in China and they want to get an exemption. And of course, he's got this power. People have to apply to him. They have to supplicate themselves to him and, bow before him and beg for their special exemption for the taxes. And my tweet was really just about how obscene it is to have real producers, real creators, real geniuses have to go and bow before someone like Donald Trump or Howley or whoever these people are and ask for whatever the quote special favors are that government has arrogated to itself the power to grant or withhold. It's disgusting. Yep. So here's Howley. It's, hey, well, I can't create any of this. I couldn't begin to conceive of and put together an organization and a platform technology like Facebook, but let me tell them what they have to do,
And let me tell consumers how they should behave. Let me run consumers' lives because I know what's good for them and they don't. And this is the whole agenda of this conservative nationalism that I spoke about a few shows ago. They want to dictate our values. They want to dictate our morals, and they want to shape us. And they say, we need to use government to shape the morality of a country. And an immoral country cannot be a good country. So we need to shape that morality by using government to do it. That is the post-Trump conservative movement. And that's the power. Where the power lies in the post-Trump conservative movement.
Okay, so let me see if I can get you, because I have an actual question for you, and maybe you can tie it into this whole thing about the problem with conservatives in relation to the leftists today. The other day, Bernie Sanders tweets this out. He says, greed is the religion of the billionaire class, and a nation based on greed will not survive morally, economically, or politically. And he says, that is why we fight to take power back from the billionaires and put it in the hands of the people where it belongs. Typical Marxist class BS, and he's going to go out there and help everybody by stealing from the ultra rich. Someone, quipped on, I think it was Motive Power, quipped on Twitter, but not the millionaires, because Bernie's a millionaire, just the billionaires. Only we're going to take from them, right?
If you own 50 houses, it doesn't count. You have to own at least 5.
Oh my God. So, Shapiro tweets back to him. And at first, Shapiro, he's very witty and incisive, and he'll come in with some good stuff sometimes. But this is what he says. He says, greed is literally your religion. You want to steal other people's money and distribute it as you see fit. That's his first answer. And he's got a thread and he goes on with some other stuff. But when I look at this, I mean, first of all, I have avoided attacking the whole, what I call the G word, the greed word myself. I don't know that I would tackle it in a situation like this. And I did not. And you can see my answer. We don't have to read it now, but you can see what I did instead over at don'tletitgo.com. But my question for you is, would you tackle the word greed in there at all? Or would you go in the direction that Shapiro went? And if not, why not?
No, I would never go in the direction Shapiro went. I mean, this is the same direction they go when they say, oh, you know, let's say replace greed with selfishness. And if Bernie Sanders said, what we need is get rid of selfishness, which drives these huge profits, which drives these people. Well, what's his name? Ben Shapiro would have tweeted back and said, no, you're the selfish one.
Right.
You're trying to achieve power and you're trying. It's exactly the same thing. That the left and the right agree that greed is bad. They just see greed in different things, and they use it in different ways. So the right accuses the left of being greedy and selfish in wanting to control people's lives. The left accuses the right of being greedy and selfish because they want to leave people alone to produce. They both reject the terms greed and selfishness. Now,
well, okay, so am I polluted because I avoid the term greed myself? Is it because I have allowed them to destroy that term for me? I mean, I use selfish. I understand more how to use that.
I mean, didn't Ayn Rand use the word greed in a positive sense?
Yes. But I'm just telling you, I'm confessing that I have not,
and I'm with
kind
you,
of done the work to shore myself up with respect to this term.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult word because you can see why it's used in a negative sense. You know, because it's hard enough to defend selfish, but then greed has this voracious appetite, this single-mindedness to it. Now, I don't mind the word. I think it's a single-minded pursuit of fill in the blank. That's greed.
Sure.
And if it's single-minded pursuit of wealth, then there's a way of, I mean, what does single-minded mean? I guess how single-minded is single-minded? You know, does it mean you ignore everything, all your values, and just go after this? It's trickier to defend, and I'd rather focus on defending selfishness. It's more to me an issue of priorities. I think in the end, it's probably an okay concept. It's probably a legitimate concept in the sense of meaning single-minded pursuit of something. But in the battle for all the terms that we have to fight for, I'd rather focus on selfish and not focus on this. I certainly wouldn't use it in the way Ben Shapiro.
No, of course not. Because, like, you know, to say that that Sanders is greedy, then you're just going ahead and allowing greed to be further debased as a term. And like, I don't want to, especially on Twitter where you have a 280 character limit, I'm not going to tackle the G word. And at the same time, I'm not going to, participate in something like what Shapiro's doing, which is further making the job of defending that term impossible, because he's corrupting it as well. So I just talked about power, right? Power is something that we could, defend. And I juxtaposed the power of a producer versus a power of a wielder of a government gun like Sanders.
It's an excellent time to bring up the distinction between political and economic power. So
that's what I focused on. And that seemed to get a decent amount of traction there, which is pretty cool. So, yeah. Obviously not a retweet from Shapiro though, right? Because I think I gave a really good kind of.
I'll be going up against Shapiro soon. So
are you? Is it going to happen?
Can't say anything, but something's going to happen.
Just did sort of.
Well, something's going to happen. All I can say, I can't say where, when, how, why.
I know I'm invited.
Nobody's invited. Anyway,
gonna happen. Oh, that's mean.
As soon as it's available, I will let everybody know. I've been sworn to secrecy by the Shapiro people, so I can't say anything.
Okay, so here, okay, I'll ask you: is Shapiro going to talk to me anymore now?
Yeah, I don't see why you didn't slam Shapiro. you brought up a separate point.
No, I mean after you talk to him and you're my friend. Sorry.
Oh, that I don't know. You might want to distance yourself from me if you want to keep your relationship.
Let me check and see if he still follows me on Twitter. Okay,
well,
let's see.
I haven't talked to him yet, so I haven't pissed him off yet.
Oh, okay. See how I just did that? I got a little bit of
information out of me.
I was so devious. Really wasn't meaning to do that. So yeah, so that's again on this whole sort of communism, Marxism, materialism, the haves and the have-nots that Howley seems to be diving into, just like Sanders. And along those lines as well, you might want to check out a little exchange that I had with Harman Kaslow. You know who he is?
I do. I know Harman well.
So Harman
was the producer of the Atlas Shrugged movies.
Yes.
Because we do have an audience that,
that doesn't know. Yes. So I had replied to Trump. I actually sent 2 tweets to Trump about that one where he's gloating about having this power over Apple, about whether to grant or deny a special exemption from tariffs that shouldn't exist for anyone, mind you. I'm against tariffs
the other one is funny is the one where he's threatening the French with tariffs on wine. But anyway, that's a different story.
Oh, gosh.
Because the France has imposed taxes on American high-tech companies. Special tax for tech companies. I don't know if it's exclusive for American tech companies or on tech companies, but it's going to affect American tech companies disproportionately because they don't pay enough taxes because of Ireland and all this stuff. So he's imposed tax. So Trump said, okay, if you're going to do that, he said, this is what he said. I'm paraphrasing. He said, only I get to tax American companies. You keep your hands off of the companies. If I will tax companies, right? You don't get to tax my company. American companies get taxed by me.
It's like the mafia boss guy saying, okay, well, this is my turf over here. X number of blocks.
It would be funny if it wasn't so serious. It really would.
Oh my gosh. So one of the answers that I gave to Trump about Apple, it's just this, right? Because, the way he's talking to these companies, it's as if he is somehow superior to these people who are producing values he could never dream of producing, right? So I say,
chief, right?
Yeah. So I say, I have a powerful computer in my pocket thanks to them. Do you have any idea what that means at all? That's it. That's the answer. It's like, how are you talking to these people? Well, I'll either grant or deny your exemption from a tariff that is basically making you pay for who knows what. We don't even know where this tariff money is going. I mean, the whole thing is just obscene. Anyway.
I wonder what phone Donald Trump uses. I don't think do they use Apples? Do they use iPhones? Or do they use Google? Do they use Samsung phones? Do they use those evil Korean phones? Did they use, you remember what were the phones with the keyboard on them? Blackberries. Because they were
the Blackberry.
Do you know where Blackberries are made?
Okay. Look, I can tell you right now.
Blackberries are Canadian.
I'll tell you what he uses. So okay. I just went to his account to look at this tweet that I had answered the other day. Oh my God, it's perfect. It is so perfect. Apple will not be given tariff waiver, blah, 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 Mac Pro, etc. Twitter for iPhone.
Okay, there you go. He uses an iPhone.
He's on an iPhone. He is on an iPhone.
Because if he was using a BlackBerry, that would be Canadian. And because at some point there was security reasons why everybody in the White House was using a particular phone. All right.
That is obscene. Anyway. So Kaslow writes back. He says, tariffs are bad economic policy.
Except.
Period. Yeah. He says, however, as imposed on China, these tariffs are designed to punish China for stealing our IP, among other anti-America activities.
Not true. None of that is true.
That he says, Apple's consumers will pay for it, but Apple's consumers have been voluntarily overpaying for Apple products.
Says another chief central planner in charge telling me what's overpaid and what's not, what I'm overpaying for.
Yeah. So I went back and forth. I'm not going to bore you with all the exchange now. Finally, as it kept going back and forth, and he's saying, well, Apple turned in all these great profits and whatever. So I said, well, it does remind you of what Reardon was told by the government about when they were clamping down on him, you'll find a way. Come on. That he's saying Apple will find a way, or Apple customers will find a way, because they've been willingly paying more anyway. So what does it matter that this is just another redistribution scheme, and that taxation is theft, and this is another tax, and it's not actually solving any problem of IP theft or anything anyway? Forget all that. You'll find a way.
Yeah.
So
who are the producers?
Yeah, this is sadness. So can we go back to the thing that has been at the forefront of my consciousness, if you will, which is this FTC clampdown on Facebook via this order that is, I guess it hasn't been fully accepted by the court yet. And there's already been one challenge to the acceptance of this order, but this is the order that the FTC proposes to have governing Facebook for at least the next 20 years. Because one thing you have to understand about these orders, and there was already an order, a so-called consent decree, that was on Facebook that was supposed to be for 20 years, but this is now a new 20 years starting the clock over again. Why? Because every time they find something new that they say that Facebook did wrong that is supposedly in violation of the last order, they can start a new clock of 20 years again, right? And just basically control Facebook forever now in perpetuity. So this one's supposed to be 20 years starting, I guess, the end of June, whatever. And the way that I read this, there is a substantial risk of data, Facebook data, being given over to not just the FTC, but the Department of Justice as a result of this order, because one of the first paragraphs in it, it's on page 4 or whatever, says that for purposes of the order, the DOJ is authorized to stand in the shoes of the FTC. And that includes in the taking depositions and approving the, so-called, monitor, the person who's outside of it, who's going to do these assessments, these periodic reviews. Also, the people who are able to interact with the independent members of the board and things like that. But if you want to look at all of the provisions of this order, not all of them, but at least the ones that I highlight, I call them the lowlights, actually. You can go to, I've got actually legalizeprivacy.org now. Legalizeprivacy.org has these posts on this, as well as my blog at don'tletitgo.com. But yeah, Department of Justice has the same rights as the commission. They can approve the person who is selected to conduct assessments that is described in the last part, and any other power basically that the FTC has. The thing that I wanted to ask you about in particular, because your expertise, Yaron, is in corporate government, governance and corporations in particular. What the FTC is doing here is they are telling Facebook that they have to change the makeup of their board of directors, that they need to first put together a so-called independent nominating committee, and that committee is henceforth, at least for the 20 years, going to be responsible for choosing so-called independent directors, including an independent privacy committee. And these are members of the board of directors, right?
Yep.
These are people who are being told that part of what they have to do pursuant to this order is meet periodically with this assessor who's an outside person. And this person, all these people have to meet certain qualifications such that the mere meeting of the qualifications is going to make them sympathetic to oversight by government, regulation by government, being told what to do by government, handing information over to government, right? That's going to be in the nature of the beast. Anyway, so there's these independent directors. They are going to meet behind closed doors, behind the back of the other directors. And they are being told explicitly to talk about management. What are the difficulties that you've had with management, et cetera, these independent directors. They have to write all of this into their corporate charter governing the organization. And then there's this one, it's great. They put these provisions here. They say, here, there's these new independent directors. These independent directors, obviously, by the way we're describing what they have to do, by the way that we are telling them that they're going to be appointed, the qualifications that they have to have, we know that they cannot have the same type of loyalty to Facebook as a business organization as the other types of directors, the quote non-independent directors, right? But nonetheless, they have that funny provision in this order that says that nothing in the order is supposed to be construed to alter or expand the fiduciary duties or something like that, which is just such phony language. To me, this is breathtaking. I mean, Facebook is essentially losing control of their organization because they have arguably, and I would agree with this, that they have made some mistakes in the realm of privacy. But the fact that they've made some mistakes
doesn't seem to fit the
yeah.
But look, so there are two issues. One is, in spite of it sounding draconian, it's not new, right?
Okay.
A lot of this already exists in corporate governance. The law already requires this, I think, for the worst. So whether it's, some states literally require this. Some states just recommend this. But for example, the nomination of independent directors and what is an independent director, which is all bogus and nonsense, is something that's been in existence since the 1980s, since the late 1980s in corporate law and in corporate governance.
And is it because it's imposed on the so-called bad actors among the corporations to remedy some ill that they've supposed to have committed? Is that the idea?
Well, the big sin that managers commit, supposedly, is that they work for their own benefit and not for the benefit of shareholders. That's sin. That's like the legitimate sin that we're trying to deal with, right? So the legitimate issue is, because shareholders don't have direct access to managers, you're trying to make sure managers don't run the corporation for their own short-term well-being. That is to make as much money as they can at the expense of shareholders, at the expense of the owners of the company. So the shareholders appoint directors in order to do that. And the law says, or the law recommends, and in some states says, that these directors, a significant number of them, have to be independent. And that certain committees of the board of directors have to be composed of only independent directors. For example, things like governance committee, nominating committee are often independent, but audit committee, and Sarbanes-Oxley, which was passed in 2002, was federal law that mandates a lot of this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Now, the bigger issue that in modern times these outside directors are supposed to represent is no longer shareholders. Now they're supposed to represent society. So the sin is that managers are not taking into account all the stakeholders in the corporation, and so we need outside directors. We need people like lawyers and deans of schools and political activists and community activists, and now employees. That's Elizabeth Warren's big push, to be directors of companies in order to represent the corporate social responsibility, the society as large. So the directors don't not just work for their own behalf. They also, God forbid, work for shareholders. They've got a bigger mandate. They have to work for society. So there's a lot wrapped up in this. And what they're doing is they're taking processes that already exist in corporate law, primarily post Sarbanes-Oxley, but it started in the late 80s when they tried to when state governments tried to pass laws to prevent hostile takeovers. Again, to prevent the market from actually working. And since then, what we have seen is government manipulating boards of directors more and more to achieve their social ends, dictating the way boards run, the relationship between. And I remember I was invited once to a directors forum. This is a forum of directors of companies who go, there are a lot of people who are directors of 4, 5, 6 different companies. And I said, you know, the government should stay out of it. I said the whole concept of outside directors, the way it's understood today, outside directors today means people who have no knowledge of, no interest in, and no understanding of the business involved. So the more removed you are from the business, the more outsider you are, the more valuable you are considered.
It's so Rawlsian. It's completely Rawlsian. This is why I'm laughing. It's, you know, it's the only way that you can figure out what the right thing to do is to.
And if you're ignorant.
Yeah. Well, the veil of ignorance. You're behind the veil of ignorance and you don't know your particular. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So this is complete Rawlsian. So the further you are, and it's of course super altruistic, right? Because if you're a shareholder, you're not an outsider anymore because you have a vested interest. But the whole point of outside is to protect shareholders. Who protects shareholders the best? Shareholders. So the best outside director is a shareholder, not a management. The best outside director I know is somebody like Warren Buffett, who has a lot of shares, who has a lot of clout, but is not a management, has no incentive to promote managers, and has every incentive to maximize shareholder wealth. But they don't want that because they don't want self-interest. They don't want selfishness. They don't want people, they don't trust the self-interested motive. They want altruists. They want people who don't understand anything and who don't have any interest, who don't really care about shareholders. That's who represents shareholders. And of course, because they don't care, they don't represent shareholders. They represent these wider social whatever. And that's how corporations are going downhill. They're being socialized. Corporate social responsibility has been promoted for 30, 40 years now. And it is a complete and utter disaster. And by the way, Sarbanes-Oxley, which promoted a lot of this stuff in the guise of preventing fraud, it was passed by George Bush, and Senate voted 98-0 to pass it. Not a single Republican voted against it. So
this is truly
so
disgusting. Yeah.
This is how, you know, they're using conventional today corporate governance mechanisms now to create a privacy committee. You know, we have committees on everything else. Now we'll have a privacy committee.
Yes. And that privacy committee is going to be inherently responsive to and receptive of government oversight in particular. And that's the thing that is, yeah.
Right. They interact with the government overseer more than they interact with the CEO.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this thing is fascism. This is pure fascism, what the Justice Department is doing. If Facebook violated somebody's rights, which arguably they did, they pay a fine to the people whose rights were violated. The Justice Department shouldn't get $5 billion. The people, Facebook users should get $5 billion.
Yeah.
And the remedy should be, I don't know, we're going to watch you more carefully. And if you violate the rights again, the penalties will accelerate. But,
well, and why not just, you know, I did see some news today about there's going to be a class action against Google for something. I can't remember.
It's not a criminal issue.
Yeah. So do that, right? And maybe the remedy would be that each person who actually was affected by the bad policy, maybe they should be given free Facebook ads or something, and then they can become entrepreneurs and go out and make some money on social media and kind of learn what it is to run a business.
Well, we have judges and courts. That's why we don't have, central planners in charge. But what we're seeing here with these consent decrees is that is central planning. And that was true of Microsoft. That is true with Apple and iTunes, even though there was a court. But again, the court appointed a government bureaucrat to sit at Apple to approve all contracts that YouTube committed to, that iTunes committed to. So that was years ago. So this use of government instead of the market, and here the legal market, is just atrocious, and fascism. This is what fascism looks like.
Yeah. You know, and like I said, you know, the way you read these, they say, oh, it's 20 years, but there are all kinds of provisos in it to expand that term.
20 years is like I mean, what internet company existed 20 years ago? There was no internet 20 years ago.
No, I mean, is Facebook going to
This is
exist
the
in
birth
20
of the-
years, right?
79. Google was just maybe starting. Amazon was like selling books online. That was about it. There was no Facebook. There was no social media. There was 20 years in technology is a lifetime. It's like 100 years in any other area. It's absurd.
Yes. No, it's completely crazy. There are a couple provisions that I want to talk to you about, and about the information sharing.
Just leave time for the super chats.
Oh, we have super chats. Yeah, I'm okay for a bit. It's still, if you are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that is concerning to me talks about the fact that they have to retain for 5 years the following. I'm going to read it to you. Each materially different document relating to respondents' attempt to obtain the consent of users, referred to in Part 2, titled Changes to Sharing of Covered Information. So basically, if Facebook makes any modification in the way that they are going to treat information at all, then they have to get these new consents, and they have to retain for 5 years all the attempts to obtain consent about this. It said, then I'm continuing to read it here. It says, along with documents and information sufficient to show each user's consent. So imagine they have to retain records of each user's consent for these certain types of information falling under this class for 5 years. And to me, I read that as, even if you delete your Facebook account,
Yeah.
Facebook is required to keep this for 5 years, which they're not supposed to be able to do.
Space in the Google Cloud or whatever, in the Amazon Cloud or whatever, so they can retain that.
They also have to retain, according to the order, documents sufficient to demonstrate on an aggregate basis the number of users for whom each such privacy setting was in effect at any time respondent had attempted to obtain and or been required to obtain such consent. And then, of course, if that isn't enough, you skip down a couple more and there's a catch-all. All records necessary to demonstrate full compliance with each part of this order, including all submissions to the commission.
I mean, but there might be some legitimacy there. So think about it this way. So let's say I think my privacy is being violated by Facebook, and I want to go back and see how I set the privacy settings and what I signed. Shouldn't Facebook have that? I mean, I'm not sure this is
well, but here's the thing. If you should have what they call, I would say, a right to be forgotten as well, right? So, but suppose Facebook says
it's just my settings, right? And it's just my signature saying I've read the privacy rules and I accept them, right? But shouldn't I have access to that to be able to evaluate whether, and shouldn't they want to keep them anyway, because they will want to be able to defend in court and saying, look, you set your privacy settings this way. We didn't violate privacy.
Well, okay, so they would want to. But the whole point is that any of this should be up to the market to decide, right? So Facebook.
I'm not sure. So it seems to me like a court, if a case was in front of a court.
Well, and Facebook destroyed it, right? So, but suppose they say, we want to give you the ability to delete all of your information on our records.
Well, but some information you might not be able to delete because there's legal liability here. So you can't just delete all your information. You can't just walk into a company and say, all the contracts I have with you forever, I want to delete. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, there's a reason why they, so they could say, yeah.
Then it should be the normal statute of limitations for anything, right?
I mean, my guess is that if there was a lawsuit around privacy, the courts would establish a precedent, and they would say, companies that have you sign privacy requirements should keep that for as long as you're on the platform for another 5 years or something, because so that if you ever want to sue them or if they ever want to come back at you, it's documented. It seems reasonable to me that a court would require something like that.
Okay. So then maybe, and first of all, what is the standard statute of limitations? Typically, I always learned in law school it was 4 years, so this is 1 year different. Okay, what about that? But then the question is, given that they are retaining records of each individual user and each individual user giving certain types of consent, then my nemesis, the third party doctrine, kicks in, and the, DOJ and the FTC can say, hey, you've given permission to Facebook. Here they have records of your consent that we've required them to keep and everything else. And we're just doing this as part of protecting your privacy. But look, lo and behold, we have your data. Now, mind you, in another part of the order, it says it actually gives Facebook explicit permission to do this. So suppose you decided now, you see this order and you see that there's government oversight and you have some things in your Facebook. You want to keep your account, but you want to delete certain things that are there. There was, some picture you're embarrassed about at that party you got drunk at or whatever it was, right? If you delete it, it says that they can keep all your metadata. So, metadata is something that still does have a value of privacy attached to it as well. It's like, oh, so she had some picture and she deleted it, and then, you sent a picture to somebody or, whatever it was, right? They can retain the metadata associated with those things as well. And that could be turned over potentially to the government.
But that's the problem there is the third party doctrine, right? So
yes.
I don't think it's anything else. It's the idea that if you give up control of your data consensually to one of these companies, you are giving it up to the government. That is ridiculous. So, but once you deal with the third party doctrine, then that's not a problem anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
conceivably. So then here's the thing, right? So as of now, the third party doctrine is still in effect because there hasn't, they've done this very concrete bound ruling on Carpenter about 127 days of cell phone location data or whatever it is. They're very pragmatist about this. So they haven't overturned the third party doctrine generally. And in the final provisions, they talk about the fact that they can request and receive all sorts of information from the company. So it says within 14 days of a written request, respondent has to give us additional compliance reports or other requested information. It all has to be sworn, blah, blah, blah. It says the commission is also authorized to obtain discovery without further leave of court. So they don't have to go back to the court to request any of this information. And it's just other requested information that they're going to say, oh, it's so relevant to whatever.
A massive violation of Facebook's rights and our rights and everything. And it gives them access and power that's unprecedented over a company that holds information of, I don't know, a billion people. And it's ludicrous, but this is a Republican Justice Department. So.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that's the thing that a lot of people think, oh, well, we don't have to worry about it because they're not going to do anything nefarious with this. I don't know that that's true,
on how much you use Facebook, because if you're using too much Facebook, you will get your social score lowered. Oh, no, that's China. But, we're heading towards that. Republicans would love to give us all a social score based on whether we consume pornography, based on how much time we spend on social media, based on how often we go to church, based on all these things. They would love to grade us all and some on our bulletin boards would like to have certain people with low enough social scores deported from the country. Some people have declared that I should be deported from the country because I support immigration. So I have a very low social score.
That's true.
People don't know what I consume on the internet. Oh my God, if they saw that, they'd really kick me out. But yeah, I mean, this is all kind of the central planning mentality. And you can't assume either party is not going to use the data in order to attain power. Of course, they're going to use the data, and both parties want to control you.
Yeah. And 20 years is a long time. And there's all sorts of provisions in this order that give them the ability to catch Facebook in some sort of.
And nobody's talking about it. And nobody seems to care.
And that's the thing. I mean, getting people motivated about this. I think one of the biggest things, that look, Facebook is being required to keep this user data about you. And I guess I should add, and thanks to the third party doctrine, they can turn it over without a warrant to the government. All of your user records, basically all the different things that you consented to and everything else on Facebook, they're going to be keeping, and they're probably going to keep more rather than less so that they can cover their butts, with respect to this order, because they, who knows what they're thinking. There's all sorts of provisions in there about if you declare bankruptcy, this, that, and the other, right? That they probably know what they're doing to these companies. And if Howley's regulation gets passed, doesn't that basically mean the end of a lot of these platforms? That's what I want to know.
Luckily, I don't think it'll pass, but these kind of things are truly scary, and it's only going to get worse because we know that this stuff is bipartisan. Everybody's going after these companies, and it's just a question of when they come up with a big bill and how they structure it, whether they use antitrust, whether they use something else, to go and break these companies up or disrupt them in other ways or regulate them and control them. Fascism is on the rise in America. Elizabeth Warren's a fascist. Trump is a fascist in this sense, and they are moving together in a sense towards greater and greater control of our economy.
To me, it's rather disturbing. And as I said, from the standpoint of government accessing information potentially under those catch-all phrases in this order, they can access it without a warrant. Why? Because at least as far as they know right now, the third-party doctrine is applicable. And look, we really want to make sure, Facebook, that you get all these consents, right? Consent. And the more consents that they can show that you have given with respect to the data, even though you're consenting only to Facebook or only to some partner of Facebook, the government still wants to pretend that once you consent to the sharing of your data, therefore you no longer have that reasonable expectation of privacy in it. Therefore, the government can grab it without a warrant. And especially if they're doing it under the pretense of, we're just protecting your privacy. We are going after big, bad, evil Facebook on your behalf to protect you. And, we're so good. It's not like we're going to do anything bad with your information. So it's truly disturbing. I'm going to drop into the program notes right now as I'm talking to you over at don'tletitgo.com. I'm going to drop in somewhere. Where am I going to drop it? I've got your show from yesterday in there as well. I guess I'll put it right after Taylor's article. My little social media fantasy that's never going to come true. I'm very realistic about this, but what it is that I would love for these companies to do as a result of, both Republicans and Democrats, left, right, everybody is unified after these companies.
Yeah, so we're going to see more and more consent decrees like this. We're going to see more and more regulation. We're going to see the government going after more and more companies. I'm sure the Justice Department is preparing a case against Google. They're preparing cases against Amazon. There's a lot of action going on in the background that we don't even know. And Congress, if the Justice Department doesn't do it, then Congress is going to pass laws and bills that dozens of proposals around this. It's only going to get worse. All right, should we take some super chat questions?
Yes, go right for that. And then I want one thing to ask you about at the end that's in the program notes. So go ahead.
All right, so let's see. We got a bunch of them. Let's do the greed thing again. Might greed be distinguished from selfishness as the destructive hedonistic corollary, which is the other side of an altruistic coin? You could, but I don't think that's how it's used, right? Greed on Wall Street doesn't mean hedonistic. It just means people are trying to make a lot of money on Wall Street. That's all it means. They're single-mindedly pursuing money on Wall Street, but that's their job. That's great that they do that. That's fantastic. So I don't think that's how the term is used. The term is used to undercut self-interest, to undercut selfishness, to undercut ambition. It really is to undercut ambition. Now, if we cleaned it all up, would the term greed be a useful term? I don't know. It might turn out to have a negative connotation, but you'd have to do so much cognitive cleaning before you got there. It's just, I would never use it as a negative, but I would also not use it as a positive. I just don't use the word greed. It's just easier not to use it. And if somebody says greed on Wall Street, I ask them, what do you mean? You mean Bernie Madoff? Or you mean the trader on Goldman Sachs trying to make money by I don't know, or do you mean private equity trying to improve companies by merging them? Or what? There are a million things, right? Is Bernie Madoff greedy? Well, yeah, that's bad. Is the trader in Goldman Sachs greedy, trying to make money? No, he's actually increasing efficiencies in the market. He's making them. The point is, how is it being used? And you've got to go underneath how it's being used and criticize the underneath, not criticize the concept. Don't dwell on greed. It's just not worth dwelling on one way or the other. So don't use it positively, don't use it negatively, and attack the context.
And that's what I did. So I'm glad. Yay. Okay.
Little off topic, but wanted to know about Objectivist's view on Thomas Sowell. I mean, Objectivism doesn't have a view of Thomas Sowell because Ayn Rand didn't know him, obviously. My view on Thomas Sowell is that he's a good economist, not a great economist, a good economist. He's flawed as an economist. For example, if you read his economics textbooks, it talks about economics as the study of something under
conditions of scarcity. Yeah.
Scarcity thing. It's just not right. It's just a wrong way of looking at economics. I think it's a lot of his stuff on ethnic groups and society and immigration is pretty good. But he's also very conservative. He's not religious, but he uses religion. His moral justification for capitalism is very altruistic. So he's good, but not great, right? And I like him because he stands out. He speaks up. He's not afraid. I like his character in that sense, but I don't always agree with him. On a lot of things, I don't agree with him.
So there's that one. Can you think of another concrete? Because most of the things that I've seen, I've always liked from him, but people are just pulling out fabulous quotations from him and putting them around. And I've loved all the ones that I've seen, but I don't know enough about him otherwise.
I mean, I also think, and this is true of some of the Black intellectuals on the right, in trying to say, look, the problem with that community are not just it's not racism, it's all these other things. And in their attempt to criticize the Black community for real cultural problems within the Black community and so on, I think they underestimate the power and the extent of racism in this country and in Europe as well. I mean, all over the world.
Okay.
So I think they want to be they so want to say. And I agree with them on all the stuff that they criticize the Black community for. But you've got to also acknowledge the real role racism plays. And it's a real role, and has a real impact. It's not a marginal impact. Whether it's institutionalized or not is not the point. It's the point that it's there. And don't tell me there are no racists in America. I see them online all the time. But I've also met them, and I've experienced them throughout my experiences in the U.S. So that's one other. I can't.
Did I tell you my story of racists that
No.
I didn't know? Okay, so I lived in Texas as a kid, and we had neighbors across the street who were sort of like the grandparents of the neighborhood. So whenever you come home from school or work or whatever, they would be sitting in their lawn chairs out on their front lawn, welcoming everybody, and they were just, I guess, retired and so friendly to everybody. And when we were moving from this neighborhood, it was somewhere around Houston. We were moving. My parents had gone out to dinner with them to basically, say goodbye and everything. It was a farewell dinner. But this is after we've been living there for a few years already. And my mother told me later that this couple, who I thought was just so nice, that they refused to be seated in a restaurant, a really nice restaurant in downtown Houston, next to a Black table, a table of Black people who were enjoying their dinner. They would refuse to be seated there. That's how racist these people were.
Wow.
This is when I was growing up in the 80s. So.
No, and it was much worse, I think, in many respects then, but I think it's now coming back. I think racism is back on the rise. The other thing I said about Thomas Sowell is he often cites altruism as the moral basis for capitalism, and often uses Christianity as the basis of morality. So he's a conservative in the traditional sense, but he's a far better conservative than the conservative nationalists that are around today.
Okay. Good. Other questions or no?
Yeah, there are a bunch of them. Has the Squad or the Green New Deal created a void on the right for equally ludicrous proposals to grow government? Is politics just becoming a race to ridiculous extremes to solve fake crises? We must be bored.
Looks like Hallie is jumping in right there. Isn't Hallie doing that?
Well, but who started it? I don't know who started it, right? I wouldn't blame the Squad, because I think the Squad, they got elected in the midterm election after Trump. So you could argue that Trump started it, and the Squad is the reaction of America to Trump. So I think what's happened because of Trump's election is that the left has moved far out to the left, and that the right has moved far out to the nationalistic, xenophobic right. And the middle is unrepresentative and shrinking, both as in terms of representationally, intellectually, but also in terms of just the opinions, the views of the American people. So there is this kind of, I'm going to outdo you in terms of being more radical and being more extreme, or being more, I don't like either the word extreme or radical in this context, but I don't have another one, being more crazy in these kind of things. And you're seeing Raleigh, again, was elected recently. And he's the kind of person who gets elected in the Trump era. It's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. Now, I'm not saying there weren't always Raleighs in the Senate. There probably were. But I think it's going to get worse, because I think that Trump is emboldening that type. And people who are more moderate, that said, like, I don't know, what is it? Senator Kyle from Arizona was more of a semi-free market type, but pretty moderate and on social issues and stuff like that, are not going to run, because they don't want to have to face an opposition from a Trump-like candidate. So Trump is going to dominate the Republican Party. And on the left, AOC is going to dominate the Democratic Party. Now, if AOC actually dominates the Democratic Party, then I think Republicans are going to win. They're going to win easily. And I think this is the dim hypothesis. This is Lennon Peikoff's hypothesis, right? Americans will not embrace AOC, not in masses. They'll embrace Biden. They'll embrace maybe even Elizabeth Warren if she pretends to be a capitalist, but they won't.
Well, especially when Tucker is, applauding some of her stuff. Yeah.
But they won't. And she calls a plan. Notice she calls a plan economic patriotism. AOC would never call a plan of hers economic patriotism. She's not a patriot. She doesn't care about America. Americans will not embrace explicit anti-Americanism. They will not embrace explicit nihilism. And so they'll embrace a middle-of-the-road Democrat. They won't embrace a radical Democrat, but they will embrace an authoritarian nationalistic Republican. And that's where we're heading. And in my view, that's the future. The future is authoritarianism from the right. From the right. Okay, more questions, because we got a bunch of. Opinion of California passing bill requiring presidential candidates to disclose the last 5 years of taxes to appear in order to appear on the ballot. So California just passed this. The government just signed it, I think, today.
Wow. Okay.
I'm mixed on this, right? On the one hand, I think it's legitimate to know how somebody made their money, who's running for president. Not Joe Schmo. I don't believe it's the government's business, or anybody's business. But if you're running for president, particularly if you're running for president as this great businessman, as a billionaire who's just great at business and gonna fix it, then it's legitimate to know, well, how did you make your money? And what are the means? In that sense, I'm very sympathetic to this idea. The downside of it is I'm also sympathetic to people who want to shield their income from taxes. I do it. I live in Puerto Rico for that reason, right? Legitimately, legally. But I think that basically moving to Puerto Rico has basically disqualified me from ever being president of the United States. Not just because I wasn't born there, but because I've been self-interested in shielding my taxes and shielding. Yes. So if you show the IRS and, the New York Times showed that Donald Trump, so many years, shielded a bunch of his income from taxes. Now, I don't know if it was legal or not, but assuming it was legal, then that should not be a black mark. That should not be a mark of sin. And we live in a culture in which it would be. So yes. I'm more sympathetic than unsympathetic. I think the value of knowing.
Okay. So let me state what I think you're saying, right? So I think you are saying that you are sympathetic to presidents having to make these sort of disclosures in general, because we should, as people who are voting for them, know, kind of what their financial interests are and things like this. There's a certain amount of privacy that you would give up if you are going to have the authority, for instance, to award certain contracts and things like this. One of the things that's really I think somewhat of a problem for Trump is that he's got such expansive business interests, including overseas, not just him, but his kids and stuff like that, that these could create conflicts for him in a context where government has so much power to pick winners and losers in all these different realms, right? So how much?
Yeah, I've claimed that Donald Trump has loans from the Russians and the Saudis, and that's why he doesn't want to release his taxes and stuff like that. But I don't know if that's true or not. It just seems likely to me.
Yeah.
But that's something we should know.
Yes, unfortunately. Now, it might be the case that if we had a properly constrained government, that a lot of that stuff would be irrelevant and it wouldn't be, but my, the principle is that if we need to know something in order to make sure that a president of the United States does not have a certain conflict of interest, then he's given up any privacy in that information in the act of wanting to become president of the United States. But I think what you're saying is that even though if you're sympathetic to those disclosures generally, you are in disagreement with the standard by which the candidate would be judged based on what they would find in those disclosures, things like shielding money from income taxes. I mean, one of the things that bothered me watching Trump, I mean, I didn't have a lot of hopes for him anyway, but one of the things you can point to in the debates is that he refused to defend paying lower taxes as any sort of a moral issue. The idea that you have the right to keep the money that you have earned is something that doesn't come out of Donald Trump's mouth.
No, I mean, and morality is not a concept that has any, any coin in his mind. I mean, it just doesn't. It's, can I get away with it? I mean, he says it even with these tweets, right? People said, a lot of people were offended by the tweets. He didn't say they shouldn't be offended. My tweets were rational and here's why and here's the. He said, yeah, I don't care because a lot of people like them. In other words, they achieved what he wanted, which is to get his base excited. So he doesn't care if he offended people. He doesn't care if they're right or wrong. He said this in another situation where he made a claim about somebody. And the claim was wrong, and he said basically it doesn't matter. It achieved what I wanted it to achieve.
That's it. That's like AOC saying, the actual facts don't really matter. Right?
He's an absolute pragmatist. He's 100% committed to pragmatism in a way that no American president has ever been, in a sense of his commitment to the pragmatic. Okay, 2 more questions.
Okay.
Okay. Ideas. He says ideas possess causality. And some ideas lead to destruction, though they come short of directly inciting violence. What's the justification for declaring it a violation of speech if those ideas are censored? Well, this is the thing, right? That ideas don't possess causality directly. They possess causality through an agent with free will. The whole idea of inciting is you're bypassing the free will. You're getting them riled up. And even then, inciting to violence is not exactly the same as committing violence, but it is a form of committing violence. But just articulating ideas is not action. It doesn't involve somebody actually acting on those ideas. There's an agent who then acts, and that agent has free will. And he can decide whether to act on them or not. And
so it's like Donald Trump, he tweets that the press is the enemy of the people. Now, you and I might look at that and say, there are people in the world who will say, wow, okay, the press is the enemy of the people, then I better do something about this. And something that they're going to do is they're going to do what you do to enemies of the people, which is take some violent action against them. But it's not incitement. So if Trump tweeted, they're enemies of the people, let's go get them now, or an actual urging to take an action on that behalf, then it becomes incitement. Anything short of that, you can't say it's incitement, and therefore you're not going to ban it, even if you're going to criticize it.
And think about what it would mean to say ideas have destructive consequences and therefore we should ban them. I mean, a lot of people think capitalism has destructive consequences, and for some people they do, right? Capitalism is, as I always say in my talks, capitalism is not good for the wife-beating drunk, right? The wife-beating drunk prefers socialism to capitalism. I mean, he's not well in either one of them, but he prefers the one to the other. He's worse off under capitalism. what is that? So
arguably he's worse off under
advocating
socialism.
capitalism is using force against him, and therefore we should put people who so, who do you put in charge of making those kind of making the decision of what ideas are destructive and what ideas are not destructive, what ideas are good, what ideas are bad, what ideas are bad? Because every wrong idea can lead to a bad outcome. But who gets to decide what is right and what is wrong? You do, in your mind. And therefore, the only thing we can judge, in a sense of criminally prosecute, is action. Is what you do once you have those ideas. Because that we know you did. And we know you have control over your action. Right? And we know we don't know what ideas it came from. I mean, you might say you're Marxist, you might say you're capitalist, but I don't know what your interpretation you have of them and what actually led to the violence. All I know is you were violent. That's the problem, right? It's up to intellectuals to fight the bad ideas, and they do that with ideas, not with weapons.
Exactly.
All right, last one. If both parties in the two-party system tend towards fascism, does that open the door for a serious third-party option after some serious... I don't know what the rest says. Well, yes and no. I mean, it only opens the option for a realistic option for a third party if the American people don't want fascism. But I'm not convinced they don't want fascism. The left wants their version and the right wants their version, and the middle doesn't know what they want. But if there's a significant number of Americans who don't want fascism, then there's an opportunity for a third party. And then the question is, how do you organize one, and who's going to organize one? And somebody asked me, Yaron, why don't you advocate for the Capitalist Party? The party started by Joe Sanders and
Mark Pellegrino, yes.
And Pellegrino. And I say, because it's not a political party. They haven't registered as political parties. They don't have candidates. They're not running a political. I endorse their platform. And when they actually become a political party, I might endorse them. I might support them, depending on who the candidate's on and what happens in the process. But there's no point in advocating for a party that doesn't exist. So I don't see the great masses of people out there demanding freedom. I wish I did.
I mean, there's a limited following for some of them, but there's a lot of people, I think, who would be sympathetic to, say an Amash or any sort of even the better, what we would call libertarian candidates.
You think Justin Amash can get more than 10% of the votes? I don't.
No. I don't know that he could. But maybe there are some people who could be persuaded that way if they didn't think that doom was going to happen, that if we don't embrace this right fascism, the right-wing fascism, if we don't embrace that as a stopgap measure, then the left is going to take over immediately. We're all just going to go off the cliff. And if you've got that sense that it's an emergency and that, everything's going to be horrible, then you're going to accept Leviathan of the right instead of Leviathan of the left.
That's right. I mean, and that's what you're seeing, the left demonizing the right demonizing the left, not as an ideological debate, but as demonization of the other. And so people will vote for the right because the left is so horrible. People vote for the left because the right is so horrible without actually analyzing the cause and without actually knowing what they as individuals are actually for.
Yes. So one thing, if people want to help buy us a bit more time, that's what I'm trying to do. I've got my little organization that I'm gearing up now to do something with respect to the FTC and the Facebook order. At legalizeprivacy.org, you can join in because I'm going to try to do something to stop or scale back some of this control over social media. Now, those of you who think that Mark Zuckerberg is just as bad as everybody else, I've got this meme in the program notes. Whom do you trust with your data? And there's Zuckerberg and Trump and Bernie Sanders. At least with a private company, you have the choice to get out of there and not have them sell you things or make you addicted or anything else. I took Facebook and Messenger off of my phone after this FTC order. Not that it's really going to help me that much, but it's hard, right? If you're used to grabbing that phone and having instant access to certain things all the time, it's tough stuff, right? So I'm not downplaying that, but at least it's up to your free will to do this. At a certain point, if you can never be deleted, government's going to have records of you as a Facebook user and certain of your metadata and your consents and stuff forever and ever. This is a whole different story. This is government that isn't just trying to sell you things, but that can also put you on some sort of a list.
It's truly horrific. It truly is horrific that they're violating the rights on so many fronts, and there seem to be so few voices outraged by it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try. If you are outraged by this, if you're one of the few, please come over to legalizeprivacy.org.
Say that again. What's the URL?
Legalizeprivacy.org. And why do I call it legalized privacy? Because my contention is that right now privacy is illegal, essentially, that you cannot make a contract that is enforceable as against the government, where the government can only get your information if they present a warrant. As it stands right now, if you make a contract that involves information sharing at all, once you share that information, government can grab it without a warrant. And to me, that is unacceptable. We need to legalize privacy. And the way that we make, the way we protect privacy right now, because of this high-tech sector, is through contract rights.
We need to legalize it and privatize it.
Yeah. So let's do something totally different. And I'm going to try.
Josh Hawley, a freshman who has emerged as a top Republican.
We don't want to hear about him. We want to hear something positive. Let me see if I can cheer you up a little bit. I don't know if this vehicle for trying to cheer you up is one that you are going to accept or not, but I have this commercial at the bottom of the program notes at don'tletitgo.com, and it's a commercial from Lady Gaga. What do you think of Lady Gaga, first of all?
I'm very mixed on Lady Gaga.
Okay, that's.
I think she's got an amazing voice. I don't like most of her music, and I think she demeans herself by turning it into a circus.
Okay. So she goes overboard, say, with certain of the costumes and the things that
and it detracts from the greatness of her voice and from the music. But I don't think the music's that's great. Maybe that's why she does it, in order to distract us from the fact that the music's pretty simple and pretty, insignificant. So she distracts us from that, which is unfortunate because she's got a fantastic voice. And I wish she would sing good songs, good music. And, anyway, that's my view. Yeah.
Okay. Well, she is now come out with a makeup line. So it's House, I forget the exact URL, but it's House Laboratories is what she calls it.
Well, hasn't she positioned herself as this ugly girl who's become a huge success?
Maybe, right? And so then the idea
she got that funny nose. So I think she's positioned herself as, my makeup, because, if any girl can succeed if I succeeded, kind of thing, because I was ugly. People didn't take my music seriously.
I don't know.
From her. Okay.
Anyway. But I do like the message that she puts here. She talks about she wants everybody to love themselves, and she says, they have their makeup. She says it's our house, your rules, and in effect, take this makeup and you create for yourself the look that you think is best, and again, not be so concerned. So I see that there is a core of individualism. It's funny. She says at the very beginning, it says, the last thing that the world needs is another makeup line. She says, too bad. And then she comes and she's telling you, I'm going to give you this.
So replace makeup in that whole ad with philosophy, or Ayn Rand's philosophy, objectivism. And it works, right? The world doesn't need another philosophy. Oh, well, but it does. It needs a philosophy that'll, what was the something about uses makeup to make your face or make yourself?
Yeah, well, and basically make yourself according to your own rules.
You need objectivism to make your soul well, we talked about this earlier. A self-made soul. That's what Ayn Rand was about. Most people don't have a soul. You know why they don't have a soul? Because they never bothered to make one. They never bothered to spend the time integrating their values into a whole, into something, into a soul, into a spirit, into something of value. And just like we make up our faces, some people do anyway, much more important than that is make up for the soul. And that's what objectivism is. Now,
So
there's a line you've never heard before.
makeup for the
Objectivism
soul.
is makeup for the soul.
Well, I'm going to have to think about that
Yeah,
analogy.
it doesn't work because makeup hides blemishes, and you don't want to hide. Objectivism doesn't hide anything.
Well, I mean, what you could argue is that makeup stylizes you, and so you know, in the sense that, so
I like that.
You know, objectivism we use to create a stylized universe for our own life. You have this stylized look that you can create using this makeup. Probably it's good, high quality makeup. If you see me showing up for a show here with actually a lot of makeup, because I wear relatively little makeup, you'll know it's her fault. You'll have to blame it on Lady Gaga, because the only time that I've ever worn anything close.
Well, know when you're stylizing your face.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, the only time I've ever worn even close to the type of makeup that she wears is when they put it on me for that one in studio Tucker appearance when I was there. Oh my gosh, I've never had so much makeup on in my whole life. It was crazy. But you know, she does a beautiful job with it. And
I don't wear any makeup. What's this? People are saying I wear a nice foundation. When I'm on television, I do wear makeup.
Yeah, because they put it on the men just as much as they put it on the women when you go in.
Well, I think they put more on the women, but they put quite a bit on the men sometimes. Some studios do more. Other people are asking what lipstick you're using.
Mine?
Yes. Is it red?
No, I've got this one. Actually, I don't have it right now. It's just Burt's Bees colored lip gloss. It's so simple. I'm really bad. Lady Gaga could teach me so much about makeup, and maybe I wouldn't have to look overdone. I could still be me because she wants me to go according to my rules, right?
All right, we know we passed the hour-and-a-half mark when Yaron Brook, is talking about makeup, a topic I know zero about.
Sorry, not sorry, Yaron.
All right, thanks everybody. Thanks, Amy.
I think it's a good sign about the culture that she's out there, and she talked about working with Amazon because Amazon allowed her to run her business her way, and nobody else was going to be doing that. I've liked a lot of the ways that she's rolled this out. That's really what I think
generally she seems to have this independent personality, even though I'm not a big fan of her work. I think she has certainly an independent personality. She's not one of the stars that goes out and does, I mean, maybe she does, but these silly social responsibility stuff. She seems to have a focus and go out and be successful. She really does that. Yep. All right, good. People are commenting on my skin now. All right. Maybe I'll see you next week. No, I don't think so. No, next Tuesday I've got dinner with a mutual friend.
Okay.
But I'll see you actually in a few days, probably.
Excellent. Okay.
Yep. I'll be in your area.
Beautiful.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll be on again tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. I've got a whole list, actually. Okay.
Something will happen. He'll tweet something. You'll have something.
Somebody will tweet something. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Amy. Fun show. Bye, everybody.